So if there's anything that's changed me more in my life in terms of my perspectives and also helping me to mature and become more worldly, I would say it's travel. I mean, how else can you feel like a baby, eyes wide open, where everything seems new and fresh and interesting and confusing, and even the simplest things like not being able to communicate or resigning to hand gestures to communicate, for example, pointing and facial expressions to express your confusion or your not understanding, or just laughing at some of the simplest things, and even having to ask for help. Just like when you're a little baby. Remember that? So going on a trip to a foreign country may help you to relive similar experiences, or maybe even relive experiences as an adult, similar to when you were a child and were a little bit more in need of other people's help. And in case you missed my previous video where we talked about 5 different things to see in your next trip to Kochi Prefecture, Japan, Shikoku, Japan, you might want to check that out in the description below. So Shikoku, Japan is actually one of my favorite regions in Japan to visit, and there's many reasons, some of which I'm going to be sharing with you in this video, as well as future videos and the previous video, like I mentioned just now. And it could be yours too, especially if you love a little bit of adventure and spending a lot of time outdoors and eating and exploring and traveling with some of the most beautiful scenery and the warmest people in Japan. So a few years ago, I went to Shikoku and had about a week there where we spent some time exploring the region. We rented a car and drove around, ate a lot of delicious food, and had a great time. So here are some of the things that we really had a fun time doing, and perhaps you may too. So the first thing that we did was paragliding. That was at the top of my list because I went actually in Colombia, in Medellin, which is a mountainous region in Colombia, or city in Colombia, where they have high mountains and good winds, which are perfect for paragliding. And if you don't know what paragliding is, it's basically a parachute which you're strapped into, and you jump off of a hill or a mountain, and then you let the wind carry you, and you just hang on there and you float around. And the cool thing about what we did in Shikoku was that it's a taiken, so it's an experience. You get to do it yourself, even though you don't have a license, which you may want to consider getting if you enjoy it as much as we did. But you're able to basically run off of the hill with your parachute and float. And we got a pretty good amount of airtime for our first few times. We were a little bit nervous that we weren't going to be able to do it because when we got there early in the morning, it was super not windy, but luckily the wind did pick up a little bit and we were able to get a few rounds of flight in. So give that a thought if you are considering going to Kochi as one of your first things to do. So the paragliding is at Agawa Sky Park, or Sky Park. You need to make reservations ahead of time because it's run by, I think, just one guy. And you're probably gonna need to speak Japanese. So if you can't speak Japanese, you might need somebody like a tour guide or somebody to help you do the translation. So key point there. And if for whatever reason you're scared of heights or you don't want to go paragliding, another thing that you can do, which is very traditional, especially if you're going to be visiting Japan, everybody should do this. This is an onsen experience, our hot water bath. And there's various types of onsen if you're familiar. There's indoor, and then there's also outdoor, which are known as rotenburo, which is an outdoor bath. Typically, depending on where you go, they might be in some very scenic locations, such as on the shores of an island, like we went in Sakurajima in Nagasaki, near Nagasaki, or in the forest, in the middle of the forest, kind of like what this experience was at Yunomori. And this is right next to the paragliding place, so if you wanted to, you could do both on the same day, just like we did. And you got a beautiful view of the forest, and it's super scenic, it's super quiet because it's in the countryside, and the water is warm and fresh and very relaxing. So in addition to that, at the Yunomori, which is onsen, they also had a restaurant, so you're able to, if you wanted to, you could stay there overnight and eat as well. So they serve teishoku, or set lunches and dinners, and also breakfasts. But we had a lunch there. It was very delicious, regional cuisine, and highly recommended. So in addition to the paragliding and the onsen experience at Yunomori, right next to those two places, the Nakatsu Keikoku, or the Nakatsu Gorge, in the same region. So it's like a canyon, I guess you can call it. And if you're into hiking gorges where there's a lot of rivers and waterfalls and stuff like that, you're kind of going into into a canyon exploring. That's what this region is famous for. And you can do that as well. So we explored a little bit. Some of the waterfalls there. It's very peaceful, well shaded, so you're not really in the sun, but a little bit slippery. So be mindful of that if you are going to be going there during the rainy season. You might want to be mindful of that. But very beautiful, very scenic, and highly recommended, especially with the color of the water, which that whole region is famous for. They've got very turquoise, what would you call it? I don't know, royal blue, not royal blue, aquamarine, greenish bluish. Very, 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 very colorful waters. And on the hike, you might see some of the gods or the little statues that may be protecting and watching over you as you hike. So the fourth thing that you may want to consider doing in this area is going bike riding. Depending on the area that you're in, there may or may not be bikes for rent, but one of the most popular places to get a bike and to bike around is on the Shimanto-gawa, which is the Shimanto River. And it's a very long river. It goes for many, many kilometers, and you can rent a bike at the station in Shimanto town. And I forgot how much it costs, but they have various they have a few types of bicycles. They have a manual bike and they have an electric bike. So if you want a little bit of an easier time in terms of pedaling, I'd recommend that you get the electric bike, because we did not, and we were regretting not getting the electric bike, especially as we neared some of the hills further along the river. So definitely keep that in mind. Get the electric bike if you are going to be doing this, and you'll have an excellent, amazing time exploring the area with a bike. And they'll give you a map and tell you all the different sites and stops, places that you can stop and take a look at, some of which are very, very beautiful and scenic. Definitely worth a picture, maybe even Instagrammable as well. So the fifth thing was going to be river rafting, and because we were there in the early spring, the water was a little bit cold, and so this wasn't something that we were too keen on doing, but this is something that we would definitely be doing in the summertime so that we can get out on the water. If you've never gone river rafting, it's a super peaceful way to explore a river as well as a region by just floating down. Maybe there'll be some gentle rapids, so it's not going to be intense or crazy rapids that are going to throw you off of the raft. It's going to be relatively mild, and that's definitely something that I would consider doing on my next trip, as well as surfing. So you guys know that I'm a big surfer, and the shores of Shikoku and Kochi in this particular area have a lot of beaches for surfing. So they're not going to be coral or reef breaks, if you're familiar with that, or rock reef. They're just going to be beach breaks for the most part, and the waves look pretty mellow from what I saw when we were driving by. A lot of long boarders, and definitely another thing that you can consider doing, especially during warmer weather like during the summer. And then the seventh thing is going to be diving. I'm also a scuba diver. I have my advanced PADI certification. I have just over 100 dives under my belt, and diving is one of the things I also love doing. In this particular case, I did not get a chance to go diving because we were a little bit short on time, but some of the diving is supposed to be pretty nice, especially if you are able to get some good visibility. Depending on the time of the year, all the currents and such. So scuba diving, that's another thing that you can consider doing. And I think we'll leave it at that. So are you surprised that Japan has so many outdoor activities? That's the best part of traveling, isn't it? Like, for example, when you found something new and experienced something that you're gonna remember for the rest of your life, which changes your beliefs maybe, your perspectives, the way that you see things. Kind of like hitting the reset button over and over and over again. Reset, 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 reset. At least that's how I feel each time I take a trip overseas and experience something different. Hit that baby over and over again. Beep, 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 reset, 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 reset. Speaking of which, I think there's another good way that you can also sort of change your perspectives, your beliefs, the way that you see things. And if you can guess what that might be, perhaps you do this as well, and that is reading books. Resetting your perspective on life, the way that you see things. One book that has changed my life is a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is by Wayne Dyer. If you are familiar with his works, this book is about the Taoist philosophy with a T, T-A-O, but pronounced with a Tao, so Taoism, and it's a philosophy that is from China, and I would recommend reading if you are interested in Eastern philosophy or ways of living, ways of thinking, or perspectives. This is definitely one book that I'd highly recommend and has changed my life. And I actually found out about this book through another book that I read by Stuart Wilde. So he's another one of my favorite authors, and I'll link both of their stuff in the description below. So I digressed a little bit, but if you're going to Japan or planning to go to Japan, I'd be curious if one of these activities stands out most to you, which one that would be. Let me know in the comments right now. And if you think you'd be going to Shikoku when previously this region of Japan may not have been on your list, let me know as well in the comments. So chances are, if you watch this video up until this point about Kochi and Shikoku, maybe you are interested in traveling to Japan, some of the food and the culture there, and you may have found this video interesting and useful and valuable. So if that was the case, consider sharing this with a friend or family member who you think may also find this valuable, and make sure to check out the previous video that I did on places to see in Shikoku, Japan, specifically Kochi Prefecture, Kochi-ken, as well as my next video, which is going to be about places or things that you must eat during your trip to Kochi Prefecture, Japan. Coming up in this video. Gaman dekiru? Can you wait? Can't wait. Gaman dekinai. I think you can wait. You're gonna have to wait, actually. So stay tuned for the next video, which will be right here.